The horrors of Hurricane Katrina, a catastrophic tale of natural disaster and human response. In the annals of natural disasters, Hurricane Katrina stands as a stark and haunting reminder of the destructive power of nature and the grave consequences that can befall a community when disaster preparedness and response systems falter. In August 2005, a Category 5 hurricane, Hurricane Katrina, barreled into the Gulf Coast of the United States, leaving in its wake a trail of devastation, loss, and suffering that continues to reverberate to this day. This essay delves into the horrors of Hurricane Katrina, examining its origins, the failures in the levee system that led to catastrophic flooding, the mass evacuations and the challenges they posed, the human tragedy that unfolded during and after the storm, the overwhelmed emergency services, the plight of those in makeshift shelters, the staggering loss of lives, the long-term impacts on the affected regions, and the lessons learned from this catastrophe. Ultimately, Hurricane Katrina serves as a poignant reminder of the need for improved disaster preparedness, more effective government response, and the resilience of communities in the face of nature's fury. The storm's intensity. The story of Hurricane Katrina begins with its terrifying intensity. It originated as a tropical depression on August 23, 2005, in the warm waters of the Atlantic Ocean, rapidly intensifying into a Category 5 hurricane with wind speeds that exceeded 175 miles per hour. This made Katrina one of the most powerful hurricanes ever recorded in the Gulf of Mexico. The sheer force and fury of the storm were a harbinger of the devastation it would unleash upon the Gulf Coast. Failures in the levee system. New Orleans, a city built below sea level, was particularly vulnerable to flooding. Its very existence was dependent on a complex system of levees, pumps, and flood walls designed to protect against rising water levels. However, as the horrors of Hurricane Katrina would reveal, the city's levee system was ill-maintained and inadequate to withstand the ferocity of such a powerful storm. Tragically, the levees breached in multiple places, allowing torrents of water to inundate the city. The failures in the levee system would prove to be a critical factor in the disaster that unfolded. Mass evacuations. As the hurricane approached the Gulf Coast, mass evacuations were ordered in an attempt to spare as many lives as possible from its destructive path. More than 1.2 million people were urged to leave their homes and seek shelter elsewhere. However, many were unable to evacuate due to financial constraints, health issues, lack of transportation, or simply because they chose to stay. These vulnerable populations, often concentrated in poverty-stricken areas, were left stranded in the face of impending disaster, setting the stage for the unfolding tragedy. Human tragedy. The horrors of Hurricane Katrina began to unfold as the storm made landfall. Thousands of people, including the elderly, children, and those with disabilities, found themselves trapped in homes, shelters, and on rooftops as floodwaters rapidly rose. The storm's intensity and the subsequent flooding made it impossible for rescue teams to reach many of those in distress in a timely manner. The lack of a coordinated response exacerbated the suffering of countless individuals who were left to fend for themselves in the midst of a disaster of unprecedented proportions. Overwhelmed emergency services. In the wake of the hurricane, emergency services were overwhelmed by the scale of the disaster. Communication systems faltered, hindering rescue and relief operations. First responders, themselves often victims of the storm, struggled heroically to save lives, but the magnitude of the crisis exceeded their capacity. The delayed response compounded the horrors of Hurricane Katrina, as many individuals were left without access to essential supplies such as food, clean water, and medical care for days on end. Makeshift shelters. Makeshift shelters, including the infamous Superdome, became scenes of desperation as thousands sought refuge from the storm and flooding. These facilities were quickly inundated with evacuees, leading to overcrowding and squalid conditions. The lack of adequate sanitation, security, and access to basic necessities added to the suffering and distress of those who had sought shelter there. What was intended to be a place of safety and refuge had become a symbol of the shortcomings in disaster preparedness and response. Loss of lives. The most harrowing aspect of Hurricane Katrina was the staggering loss of lives. The final death toll from the disaster exceeded 1,800 people, making it one of the deadliest natural disasters in U.S. history. Many of these lives could have been saved with more effective preparedness, evacuation planning, and response measures. The images of bodies floating in flooded streets and the stories of those who perished in the storm and its aftermath serve as a haunting testament to the magnitude of the tragedy. Long-term impact. The horrors of Hurricane Katrina extended far beyond the immediate aftermath of the storm. The destruction of homes, businesses, and critical infrastructure left many residents displaced and struggling to rebuild their lives. The city of New Orleans, in particular, faced years of recovery and reconstruction. The economic impact was immense, with billions of dollars in property damage and lost revenue, affecting not only the immediate region but also the national economy. Lessons learned. In retrospect, Hurricane Katrina serves as a powerful lesson in the importance of proactive disaster preparedness and effective government response. The failures in the levee system exposed critical weaknesses in the nation's infrastructure. In the wake of the disaster, significant investments were made in improving levee systems, strengthening emergency management agencies, and refining evacuation plans. Lessons learned from Katrina continue to shape disaster response policies and practices, not just in the United States but around the world. Hurricane Katrina was a disaster of unprecedented scale and human suffering. Its horrors serve as a stark reminder of the need for continuous improvement in disaster preparedness and response. The lessons learned from this tragedy have had a lasting impact on disaster management, but the scars it left on the Gulf Coast and its people are a reminder of the importance of resilience, community support, and the human capacity to rebuild in the face of overwhelming adversity.